Imagine you returning home after a long day of work, eager to find your family and share a quiet dinner. But instead, you receive a video on your cell phone, your wife, the person you chose to share your life with, in the arms of another man. At that moment, the world you knew collapses. It's the beginning of a turbulent journey, full of unexpected revelations and difficult decisions. This is the story of David, a man who had to face betrayal in the most unexpected place, and how he dealt with the consequences that forever altered his life and that of his family. Follow with us this emotional narrative about love, loss, and rediscovery. The moment David clicked play, a heavy silence fell over the room, only the sound of the rain against the window filling the momentary void. The video began with a shaky image of a crowded bar, the camera slowly stabilizing to reveal Sophia, his wife, laughing joyfully with a man David did not recognize. He watched, paralyzed, as they leaned towards each other, their lips meeting in a passionate kiss. The sound of Sophia's laughter, a laugh he knew so well, now seemed distant, strange, belonging to a scene he had never imagined possible. The video continued for a few more painful seconds before David was able to gather the strength to pause it. He sat there, staring at the dark screen, trying to process what he had just witnessed. How could she? He murmured to himself, a mixture of disbelief and pain evident in his voice. The reality of what he had witnessed was beginning to set in, marking the beginning of a long night of questioning and a broken heart. The revelation hit David like a physical blow, leaving him breathless and with a racing heart. He watched the video again, unable to look away, as if watching it one more time could somehow change what his eyes were seeing. The image of Sophia, his wife, the mother of his child, in the arms of another man, was a vision that defied all understanding and the faith he had placed in their love and their marriage. The sound of the rain outside now seemed to amplify his isolation, each drop echoing the whirlwind of emotions consuming him. "It can't be true," David whispered to himself, the denial mixing with the crushing reality of the betrayal. He felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and desolation, an emotional storm that left him immobile in the darkness of the room. The thought of confronting Sophia, of hearing her explanations or excuses, seemed like an insurmountable obstacle. How could words mend what had been broken? How could he look at her, knowing what he now knew? The trust, the foundation of their relationship, had been shattered, leaving him in a limbo of pain and uncertainty. In those hours that seemed to drag on until Sophia's arrival, David was consumed by a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He aimlessly wandered through the house, each room bringing back memories of happy moments that now seemed to belong to another life. The silence of the house was deafening, interrupted only by the occasional sound of Ethan stirring in his crib. David paused at the door of his son's room, watching him sleep, a glimpse of innocence and peace amid the chaos of his shattered reality. "How will I protect him from this?" he asked himself, the pain of the betrayal giving way to a deep concern for his son's well-being. As each minute passed, David's anguish transformed into determination. He knew confronting Sophia was inevitable, but he wanted to do it in a way that preserved the family's dignity for Ethan's sake. "I need answers, but Ethan needs peace," he reflected, strengthening himself with the idea that regardless of what the future held, he would do everything to protect and care for his son. Parenthood had become his anchor, a role he embraced fully, even in the face of the most painful circumstances. When Sophia finally walked through the door, the tense atmosphere became almost palpable. She abruptly stopped when she saw David awake, her smile disappearing as she noticed the seriousness etched on his face. "David, what's wrong? Why are you up at this hour?" she asked, trying to mask her nervousness with a forced concern. David, maintaining his composure, simply gestured for her to sit down. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm yet laden with deep emotional weight. Sophia sat down, watching as David retrieved something on his phone. As the video began to play, the color drained from Sophia's face, and she watched paralyzed as the proof of her infidelity was exposed. When the video ended, David looked at her, waiting for an explanation. With a trembling voice, Sophia began to speak, stumbling over her words, trying to formulate a defense. "David, I don't know what to say. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake," she stammered, the tears starting to form in her eyes. "How could this happen, Sophia? How could you do this to our family?" David asked, the pain and betrayal evident in his voice. What followed was an emotionally charged conversation, where Sophia tried to explain and seek forgiveness, while David struggled to understand not just the act itself, but what it meant for the future of his family. In the days that followed the confrontation, David and Sophia's home became an emotional minefield. David was consumed by indecision, each moment of normalcy shattered by reminders of the betrayal. He wondered how he could ever look at Sophia the same way, how they could together watch Ethan grow, knowing that the foundation of their union had been so severely shaken. With each attempt by Sophia to talk, to explain her actions, David found himself torn between the desire to understand and the need to distance himself from the source of his pain. Amidst this storm of emotions, David's decision to seek the truth through a private investigator became his only certainty. He needed definitive answers, something concrete to hold on to before he could make a final decision about his marriage. While waiting for the investigation results, David devoted himself to Ethan, finding in his son's smile and innocence a temporary refuge from the tempest that ravaged his heart. It was in these moments, playing or reading to Ethan, that David found the strength to face the next day, despite the uncertainty that the future held. The investigation led David down a path he never expected to tread. Upon receiving the detective's detailed report, his hands trembled, not only with the anticipation of what he might find, but with the finality of that action. As he opened the envelope, the first images and documents confirmed what the video had already revealed: Sophia's infidelity. But as he continued to read, he discovered something even more disturbing. The man with whom Sophia had been seen was not a stranger or a passing fancy. He was someone connected to one of David's closest and most trusted friends, revealing an additional layer of betrayal. This discovery was like a second blow to David, deepening the wound left by the video. It was not just Sophia's betrayal that tormented him, but also that of a friend, someone he trusted and considered part of his family. The feeling of isolation grew, making him question not only his relationship with Sophia, but also his friendships and the integrity of the people around him. The conversation between David and Josh was marked by a mix of tension and despair for answers. Sitting face to face in a local cafe, the air between them was charged with a palpable sadness. Josh, with a serious expression, listened attentively as David revealed the detective's findings. "I can't believe my brother would do this to you, to Sophia, to all of us," Josh said, his voice laden with disappointment and shock. "He's always been impulsive, but this crosses all boundaries." David looked at Josh, seeking not only answers, but also some kind of understanding, something that could make sense of that chaos. "How are we going to deal with this, Josh? What do I tell Ethan? How do I explain that the family he knows may no longer be the same?" David's questions were as rhetorical as they were real, reflecting the depth of his anguish. Josh placed his hand on the table in a gesture of support, We're going to get through this together, David. I'll talk to my brother. I'll try to understand what went through his head. And as for you and Sophia, whatever you decide, I'll be here for you. Family isn't just about blood ties, but about choices, about support in the most difficult moments. The suggestion of couples therapy came from Sophia on a silent afternoon, after another frustrated attempt at conversation. She looked at David with a vulnerable sincerity, an expression he hadn't seen in a long time. I know I've committed an unforgivable mistake, David, but I ask you, for everything we've already been through, for our son, that we consider couples therapy. Perhaps with professional help, we can understand what happened and how we can, if possible, rebuild something that was broken. David, although reluctant, pondered the proposal at length. The idea of exposing his deepest wounds to a stranger was daunting, but the possibility of finding a way to forgiveness, or at least some form of peaceful coexistence for Ethan, made him consider the idea. "Okay, Sophia, let's give it a try," he said finally, with a voice laden with reservations, but also with a spark of hope. The decision to try couples therapy was not easy, but it was a step towards some kind of resolution, whatever it may be. The couples therapy proved to be a much greater challenge than David or Sophia could have anticipated. Sitting together yet distant in an office decorated to promote tranquility, they found themselves forced to confront not only the affair, but also years of failed communication, unexpressed resentments, and misaligned expectations. In each session, the therapist guided the conversation with delicacy but with firmness, encouraging them to explore the depths of their feelings and experiences. For David, each revelation was like removing a bandage from an old, painful but necessary wound. He learned about Sophia, not just as his wife, but as a person with her own struggles and insecurities. Sophia, in turn, began to understand the impact of her actions, not only on David, but on the structure of their family as a whole. Together, they began to weave a new narrative for their relationship, one that included forgiveness, understanding, and above all, a renewed commitment to building a future, regardless of what it would look like. The arrival of the second envelope from the private investigator was a moment of unexpected tension amidst David and Sophia's recovery process. David hesitated before opening it, fearing what more he could learn and how it would affect the delicate balance they were trying to rebuild. Inside, he found more than just confirmations. There were evidence of previous encounters between Sophia and not only Josh's brother, but indications of other missteps that suggested a series of questionable decisions over the years. This new wave of betrayals came as an even greater shock than the first. David felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. The trust that he and Sophia were trying to rebuild now seemed like a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breath of truth. The revelation forced David to reconsider everything, not just the reconciliation efforts, but also what it would mean to remain in a relationship marked by repeated betrayals. The decision to go separate ways, although painful, became the only clear one among so many uncertainties. The new revelations in the envelope were even more devastating than the initial betrayal. Documents and photos proved that Sophia's affair had not been an isolated incident, but part of a pattern of behavior that she had skillfully hidden. Confronted again, Sophia had no choice but to admit the truth. This time, the broken trust between her and David was irreparable. With a heavy heart, David knew that the only remaining option was to go their separate ways, as painful as that was, especially for Ethan. However, he also knew that this decision, though shocking, was the healthiest for all involved. allowing them to finally seek the happiness and peace they deserved. Faced with the revelations contained in the second envelope, David found himself at a defining crossroads in his life. The nights that followed were long and lonely, each one spent in deep reflection, not just about his marriage, but about what it meant to move forward. The decision to separate from Sophia was not taken lightly. It was the result of countless hours of pain, anger, and finally, acceptance that some wounds were too deep to heal. David focused on Ethan, the beacon of hope in his personal storm. He knew the journey ahead would be difficult, but the prospect of offering Ethan a stable and loving future provided him with some comfort. David also began to rediscover himself, redefining his identity beyond being a husband and father. He resumed old hobbies, reconnected with friends, and slowly began to open himself to the idea that happiness could be found again, even after such a devastating loss. The story of David and Sophia ends here, but David's journey towards healing and rediscovery has only just begun. Although the path ahead was full of uncertainties, one thing was certain. He would emerge from this experience transformed, not just surviving, but growing in ways he had never imagined possible. And perhaps one day he would look back on this phase of his life, not only with sadness, but also with gratitude for the lessons learned and the strength he discovered within himself. Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to continue following more stories like this. I'll see you in a new story.